I told my older son, I told Will, I said, before we left on this trip, I said, we're going to see the range of diversity on our trip. We're going to see the person that's probably, they can't afford to live in anything else, so they're living in a camper like this. And we're also going to meet the person that's got the $1 million motor coach, and this is their second or third or fourth home, and they just recreationally tool around in that. And what was so exciting for me to see was the RV campground was the great equalizer, where both of those people could actually coexist.
This is the Brandon Smith Show, and of course, I'm your host, Brandon Smith, and the entire purpose of this show is one singular thing, and that is to help you live a life more free from dysfunction. So if you're like a lot of folks I talk to, they're in the middle of their careers and they're saying to themselves, well, gosh, is this it? Is this it? Like, is this really what I'm wanting to do and committed to doing? And do I really want to see this out for the next 15, 20 years? And so our topic today is, what if that is you? And what if you are considering a mid-career gap year? You want to just take a year off. You want to go do something different. Go with your family, travel, just take a break to really reflect and reset. And so to help us on this journey, a good friend of mine I have here, Ash Merchant. Ash did this, and he's going to talk about his journey and talk about kind of the learnings that kind of came from that. So Ash, I'm so excited. First, great to have you back because you've been gone for a year.
Yes.
And really thrilled to have you on the show to kind of share your journey.
Yeah.
So maybe a good starting place is help kind of walk our listeners up to a little bit more about you so they can learn more about you.
Sure.
And then walk us up to this point where you decided, yeah, I really want to do this. Like, I'm serious about this because this is a big, bold move. It's kind of like, I'm sure a lot of people dream of one day either writing a book, owning a restaurant, or taking a year off.
Yeah.
And you did it. So I really want to hear more about that.
No, all of the above. And first of all, thanks for having me today. I'm delighted to be here and delighted to share the story too, because one of the things that I realized, my wife actually brought up the idea to me a few years ago. And it's funny because one of the most common questions that I get is, how did you convince your wife to take a trip like this? And I said, oh no, it was quite the other way around. She had to actually convince me what the value of a trip like this would be. So very quickly on my background, I grew up in Atlanta, went to high school, college, and eventually graduate school, all in Atlanta. Did a lot of the traditional things of, you go to school, you work, you get your MBA, and, you continue to work. And I had just a wonderful career, largely in the human resources and HR professional services field. Eventually moved into the world of commercial insurance and outsourcing and just a lot of those things. So just, again, grew through the corporate ladder, had a great career, loved what I did. And then all of a sudden, my wife approaches me a few years ago and says, hey, what do you think about us traveling around the U.S. in an RV? I was a little bit dense about that idea.
Okay, so let me just back up a minute. So here you are, having a successful career,
Sure.
enjoying it,
Yep.
really in a senior position,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden your wife says, hey, all this great stuff we've got, let's just get in an RV.
Well, so here's how myopic I was on that thinking. So she approaches me with the idea, and immediately I pivoted to, well, sure, we could do that for 2 weeks. We could do that for 3 weeks. I even said we could do it for 4 weeks, secretly hyperventilating at the thought of stepping away from work for a month. And she says, no, I have a different idea. What do you think about this? And I was literally in just some stunned silence about it, because it was just in our marriage, I'm normally the risk taker and she's the risk averse one.
Really?
And so what made this idea even more special, and I will always love her for it, is this was such a out of the box idea for her to bring to me, and so my immediate thought, I didn't react positively to it. I'm ashamed to say. My first reactions were, "Are you kidding me? Do you realize what kind of a life we have?" Similar to what you said about we had margin, we had a big bumper around our bumper car,
Yeah.
to be able to withstand a lot of things. I was doing well financially. I was doing well professionally, reputationally. These were all great things, and just the thought of stepping away from that, even for a year.
Yeah. Well, immediately it conjures up to me. It almost feels like you might lose it.
Well, sure.
Might lose the financial, professional, relational, reputational capital
No,
that I
that's
built
right.
up. It's like,
No.
oh, be gone. People won't know who I am when I come back.
Precisely.
Like,
and
who are
it's
you?
funny, all of those thoughts crossed through my mind. And we went a little bit back and forth about the idea. And I did, I would think what any good husband would do is I told my wife, I said, all right, let me think about it some more. And we.
And just to add more to the game here, increase the stakes a little bit. It's just for the listeners' purposes here. This isn't just you and your wife.
Oh, so we have two boys.
Okay.
At the time, they were 14 and 5.
Okay.
Now 15 and 6.
So this is the whole fam.
This is all 4 of us getting in an RV, of which I have never owned, driven, or contemplated buying. The Ford F-350 6-wheel pickup truck in your parking lot is mine, which I'm pretty convinced I'm an anomaly in that truck, dressed like this. So we literally go back into our corners. Beth and I go back into our corners and just sort of think quietly about it and talk we're separately thinking about this and contemplating the idea. So we get back together, and we said, well, one of the ideas we talked about was, what if we waited until my older son is out of high school, and we'll do this as a gap year. Now, keep in mind, when all this conversation is going on, Will was 7 years probably away from graduating high school. So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, this idea will be dead by Thanksgiving. It will be gone. We will not do it. But I think I just bought a few years of time to think about it some more. God had some different plans for us. Mm-hmm. And that's when he started working on my heart about, we started paying closer attention to what was happening around us. Not even to us. Nothing bad happened. Nobody got diagnosed with any horrible medical conditions. Nobody, we were fine in our life the way it was, but we started paying closer attention to just sort of the world around us. And what ended up happening was we kept coming back to the question of, what exactly is it that we're waiting for? God had provisioned us for not only to be able to think about this kind of an adventure, but to actually pull the trigger and do it. Why would we wait? So we started, really thinking deeply about that and saying, all right, this might be something that we really want to do. Well, once we crossed that hurdle, the next hurdle was solely mine. Mm-hmm. And that was, okay, I'm a marketplace guy. I've been in the marketplace all my life. My professional reputation is here. My clients, my coworkers, my career. The thought of stepping away from that really paralyzed me, because I started getting wrapped around the identity of, okay, I'm this person in the marketplace, and if I leave it, am I going to be relevant? Am I going to matter?
Interesting. So you almost had to question or reflect on or even reset your identity to even to do this.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't have, it's a funny observation. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have thought that, considering a gap year, I would think about the monetary impact mm-hmm. and what does this mean in terms of being able to, pay bills and mortgages and all that kind of stuff. I guess I wouldn't have thought about the fact that I got to really think about my own identity, how I see myself, and this may be a change on that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, and I'll tell you, so I a couple of things, right? So one of my clients shared something with me that I thought was really profound before we left. She said, Ashley, a year's going to go by quickly. And the reality is, not only are you not going to be forgotten in the marketplace, if you are able to stay in touch with people the way in which you do today, through social media, through other business channels and such, you're going to have an exciting story to share with people, and perhaps people will see you even differently than how they see you today, better. And I didn't really think about that. I was thinking more in the sort of a scarcity mentality of, okay, if I go away, then out of sight, out of mind, and then I'm just toast in the marketplace, and I'm going to spend the next 5 years trying to rebuild and rebrand and, just professionally. And I'll tell you, Brandon, I wrestled with that for a couple of years.
Yeah.
After that, because our life was so comfortable. Christmas was boring at our house because the reality was if we needed something, if we wanted something, we just sort of went out and got it and did it and that. And it was one of those things when it came to our financial margin, we were fine. We were comfortable. We had it. Yes, we did think about the expenses and the financial impact of that. We met with our planner and talked about all the things that you normally would do. But I still kept getting hung up on, man, what am I going to do professionally? And what's that going to feel like?
Yeah. I totally get that part, because I think that we do live in a workplace world today where it's kind of a, what have you done for me lately?
Yes.
It's not a kind of a, oh, we're going to walk together for 30 years and then you're going to get a gold watch. That's not our world today. So it's very much, what have you done for me lately? And a year would be, well, you haven't done anything for me lately, would be my fear.
No, it's true. And I will tell you this. So major kudos to the people that I worked with. I worked for Aon Corporation, and it's a Fortune 250 company. And our leadership team at Aon was incredibly supportive and really gracious about my decision. I mean, it was really the conversation went a whole lot easier than I thought it would. It was, hey, we hate that you're leaving, but we love your reasons. Please stay in touch. We want to hear from you. And I thought, you know what, whether I went back to my old employer, whether I went back to a corporate life or anything like that, I could leave Atlanta with some peace of mind, knowing that, all right, that one's there, and I've got a lot of people rooting for us on the sidelines.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's fantastic. So we're going to move to break here pretty soon, but not quite yet. And so before we get into break, I'd like to now move us into the actual journey, if we're able to do that. And I'd love to kind of move into that and have maybe kind of share with us, what were some of your learnings along the way?
Yeah.
And then as we start to get towards the end of our time together, for the folks that are really contemplating this, maybe some good tips or piece of advice for them that would be kind of go or no go.
Yeah.
Like, these would be the reasons why, or situations where you should say yes, and these might be some reasons why you might want to reflect on this a little bit more.
No, that's great. So logistically, one of the things we had to do, obviously, was select the right RV and the right vehicle for us. And so Beth and I had actually gone to a couple of different RV shows. We actually flew up to Hershey, Pennsylvania.
So you went to shows.
We went to the shows, and it's funny when people don't know about the RV lifestyle. There's this automatic pivot towards the dumpy old camper, or just something that's really rustic, rough living. And what I've told people, and I remember having this conversation with my mom. I said, Mom, the range of RV living is everything from Motel 6 to Four Seasons, and we are decidedly Fairfield Inn and Courtyard people. So we're going to land somewhere in the middle, and we're going to be comfortable in this thing. So really, it was very much around finding the right home and finding the right type of environment. I needed something that we were going to be comfortable pulling with a truck.
Yeah.
So we spent a lot of time pre-trip just evaluating the different ones. There's so much information that's available now. Long story short, we ended up finding the right one for us. And we decided last summer, we actually were delayed getting out of Atlanta. So we ended up doing a bunch of what we call shakedown trips in the Southeast. So we did Tennessee, we did the Carolinas, we even did Stone Mountain locally in Atlanta. And just to make sure that we were comfortable with the lifestyle, we were able and capable of living in an RV, because we were basically moving into a 400 square foot home after having lived in a 3,000 square foot home. So making sure that we could really adjust to that lifestyle, we spent the bulk of last summer in the Southeast. And then at the beginning of October, we took off and we started heading through the Midwest. We started heading out west, and we spent the bulk of our time then in the Southwest and the West.
Okay, so now I want to get into the big journey, because that's when you become part driver, part mechanic, part everything. And so let's talk about that. But first, I see it's time for break, so let's roll into break.
Awesome.
We come back, we're going to really dive into this journey and even some of the things that maybe surprised you along the way that you didn't expect to have happen.
Absolutely.
So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Brandon Smith Show. Of course, I'm your host, Brandon Smith, and today we've been talking about that mid-career gap year. And to ask to catch everyone up, so you've now made the decision, you went to RV shows, you picked your RV, you've done a couple test runs around the Southeast to make sure you were comfortable with the lifestyle, with the whole mechanics of it, and now we have left, and we've committed, and we're going west.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little about that journey, and specifically, what were some of the surprises or learnings you had along the way?
Yeah. So one of the things that was most exciting for us on this trip was we were pulling a house that was effectively experiencing an earthquake every time we traveled. So stuff would shake, things would get loose. Sometimes there were just things that we take for granted living in a sticks and bricks type of home that we were constantly in motion and had to pay close attention to. Now, I don't know about your listeners or other people, but I'm not a home fix-it guy. That's not what God blessed me with. I got plenty of other gifts. That's probably not one of them. So I had to get real smart, real fast on things like torquing wheels, things like electrical, things like plumbing, things like just general maintenance in an RV context. And my father-in-law had said something to me, and I loved his advice before we left. He said, Ash, you know more than you think you know, and the stuff that you don't know is available on places like YouTube and other videos that if you don't know how to do something while you're on the road, chances are pretty likely that somebody else has done it, and you're going to be able to watch it and learn it. So for me, it was a test of, and really pushing around learning agility, in skill sets where I didn't either have the foggiest clue of, or I just wasn't frankly strong in. So that was a lot of the social media feeds that we had and the post and the blog. We have all these cool pictures of places that we went and things that we saw and all of that, but there's this whole other behind the scenes thing.
I don't remember seeing a picture of you like down by the side of the road on the ground underneath the RV.
There's not a picture of Will, my older son, and I, looking like we just need to put hazmat suits on because we're changing the sewage hose or so, anything like that. And it was something that I don't think we underestimated it because we knew that we were going to have to do it, but it felt like there was decisions that we had to make all the time, all day, around what was going on in the RV, and was there enough propane to heat our unit? Is it going to be cold? Do we need a heated hose? I mean, these are things you just don't think about in a traditional home setting. So that, for me, one of the learnings was my capacity to learn was greater than I actually thought it was.
Oh, cool.
And really thinking about, all right, this isn't as hard as, yes, there are some complicated things to it, but in the end, we were able to figure out most things, and the things that we weren't able to figure out, we could help, get a technician out and help us, repair the rest.
What an interesting, fascinating observation, because I've just noticed, even as I've gotten more and more comfortable and competent in the work that I do, mm-hmm. I'm less comfortable doing things that are way in left field.
Yes.
And probably because I'm more comfortable. Like I've got my competency, I get rewarded for that, and so the idea of doing something completely that I have no knowledge of or skill set would be a little bit scary.
Yes.
But at the same time, there's something appealing about. But it could stretch me. I could learn. And I love that learning agility idea. That's fantastic.
And I'll tell you what was another takeaway for me was, when you talk about being in a safe zone, safe zones are always going to be comfortable. They're going to be familiar. But when you start entering into growth zones and stretching, and that could happen, in skills, it could happen in athletics, it could happen in education, whatever that work experience, whatever situation you want to think about, when you enter into a growth zone, that becomes life transformational for people. It did for me. And I was doing things that I never thought I never even dreamed of doing, and yet figured out, man, I can do this, and I can do it, and I can do some of it actually pretty well.
Yeah.
So, this whole notion of safe zones versus growth zones, you're going to hear me talk about that a lot in these coming years, because I'm a big believer of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, so that was a big learning. What
So
was another one?
yeah, so the other was the RV subculture. This was fascinating to me. This was absolutely fascinating.
There's
to me.
laughter coming from the
Well,
studio.
there was laughter coming even within our RV because, I told my older son, I told Will, I said, before we left on this trip, I said, we're going to see the range of diversity on our trip. We're going to see the person that's probably, they can't afford to live in anything else, so they're living in a camper like this. And we're also going to meet the person that's got the $1 million motor coach, and this is their second or third or fourth home, and they just recreationally tool around in that. And what was so exciting for me to see was the RV campground was the great equalizer, where both of those people could actually coexist and actually have, some level of fellowship, and even, bound by the RV lifestyle, they had that one thing in common that allowed them to sort of come together and help each other. I can't tell you how many people, total strangers. Think about our life for that year. We were transient people, and we had total strangers helping total strangers. And again, only bound by the RV subculture. I was blown away with that because we met some of the kindest, nicest people, many of whom were in a different season of life that we were in, many of whom also I wouldn't have chosen to hang out with socially, or they just weren't, not because of snobbery or anything like that, but just because they weren't in our universe. They weren't in our normal pattern, and yet the RV lifestyle gave us a glimpse of, boy, what happens when you really step out and start getting to know people that you normally would normally not be in your pattern.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So making that shift can put us into a different orbit with different sets of people that, have different views or perspectives. And speaking of that, I know when we met for a coffee some time back, after you come back, you told a story, and I'd love for you to tell this briefly again, about George H. Bush's funeral.
So when we arrived in Houston at the beginning of December, and President Bush Sr. had just passed away, and they were bringing President Bush's body to Houston that day, the same day that we were arriving there to set up camp. We set up camp, and we had heard that President Bush was coming, and they were bringing his body to Lion State for the public appearances at St. Mark's Cathedral. So I told Will, I said, we've got to go see this. We're not going to have an opportunity to see anything like this. So we got to Houston, we set up camp, and then Will and I went out to the event. You can imagine this was a high security event. It had metal detectors and a lot of police and just, what you would expect for a former president's funeral. So we're walking in the line, and it took about 2.5 hours from start to finish to get from the beginning of the line to the 60 seconds that we got where we could walk by the president's casket and pay our respects that way. I was paying attention to the line itself and just seeing, all right, what kind of people actually came out today? The Bushes are very revered in Texas and Houston in particular also. And what I saw that day was, I saw black, I saw white, I saw Asian, I saw Hispanic, I saw old, young, just a wonderful, what appeared to be a wonderful cross-section of what America is. And I started thinking also about, why did these people actually come? Why did they come and pay their respects? Some of those people may not have lined up with President Bush politically, but they came out to honor the man, honor the office, and pay their respects. And I thought to myself, and I told Will that night, I said, this is what America is. This is who we are as a society. This is who we are as a nation, where we can set aside differences. There wasn't a separate line that day for Republicans or Democrats or other or anything like that. It was just people coming out to express dignity and respect and honor and integrity to a man who had deserved recognition in all of those areas. Again, regardless of whether you lined up with him politically or not.
So you got to see America in a different way.
We really did.
And a little different than maybe media portrays America.
Well, sure. And I think we have to be careful of that. And again, both sides of the media, of whether you're left or right or anything like that, you're going to be able to just see goodness in action. You ask about a learning. We saw humanity in action. We saw humanity in action that day, and there were so many other days where we could just see people who would come out in their communities or come out to their place of work or their RV campground or anything like that, and they want to make a difference in their communities. And we got to see that.
Yeah, super cool.
Yeah.
So I know we're starting to get close on time. I would like to move us into folks that are now really contemplating something like this. And so they're thinking to themselves, maybe it's an RV for a year, maybe it's something else completely different. They want to travel around the world, or they want to go live in another country, or what are some no-go kind of things they need to be thinking about that you could advise them on when they're making this decision?
Yeah, I would say there's a few things. One is be very clear about why you're doing it. That's probably first and foremost, is really understand your motive of doing it. And, when we did this, we made a commitment to connect more as a family. Our blog site is connecting4.com, and, we were able to connect with each other. We were able to connect with God better. We were able to just connect with other people even better that weren't in our normal pattern. So just understand what your motive and your why is of why you want to do something like this. This is not an opportunity that is without planning and logistics. You really have to be thoughtful about the financial planning of it. You have to be thoughtful about your career planning and your work planning around that. So just really thinking about that. School, obviously, if you have school-age children, you have to really give some hard thought to homeschooling and what homeschooling does. We do that. We were doing that even prior, so that logistically for us was a little bit easier.
So you already had that in place.
We did.
So you were just able to kind of keep that rhythm and routine.
We were, and actually it was funny because social studies became Yellowstone, and English became my older son writing the blog. So just some different creative opportunities there. I would say that not everybody has to do it with the kind of logistics and the kind of complex detail planning that we did. I talk about growth zones and safe zones. That could happen on your next vacation for a week. It could happen, on your next, if you choose to take a sabbatical for a month or 2 months or anything like that, or even if you're able to do a silent retreat for a weekend, really thinking and digging deeply into this idea of, how am I going to stretch myself? How can I be bold and take risks? How can I step out of this world? I mean, we live in a bubble of safety sometimes when you're at that point where things are clicking, things are going great. Yes, I've got my issues. I've got to take care of elderly parents. I've got to take care of young kids, and I'm sort of in the middle here. The reality is you're always going to have something that is going to compete for your attention. But if you're able to step back from that and really say, all right, how can I step out and do something that's just different? I think that's where growth happens, and it can happen baby steps at a time, or you can do what we did and go buy a 6-wheel truck and go buy an RV and go travel the year. I think the bigger point is be bold and take risks, because more times than not, you'll be glad you did.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So I ask every guest this question when we get close to the end here. What's one life hack for us? I don't think you're going to have an issue giving us one.
No,
what's one life hack to help us live a life more free from dysfunction?
Well, it's funny. I was thinking about this question when we were planning for this day, and I enjoy cooking. I mean, that's my thing. So I've actually enjoyed some of your past guests that are cooks and chefs. And I like the idea of planning ahead when it comes to your meals, because we live in such a fast world of, man, I got to go to cross country practice, and I've got this meeting, and I've got this thing at night, and I've got a church thing, and this, that, and the other. And food becomes it either becomes an afterthought, or you just end up shoveling in just some takeout or unhealthy choices or anything like that. So food is like therapy for me as far as cooking. I've got a big green egg. I love Dutch oven cooking and things like that. So being able to sort of plan ahead, that's sort of I was having this conversation with somebody a couple of days ago. He's a senior HR leader, and we were comparing notes on it. And what we came to was, what we loved about cooking was cooking involves task orientation and task completion. And when you're in a corporate environment, or if you're in a job that just affords you to have to deal with chaos all day long, actually having something that allows for task completion and task orientation, that's a good thing.
Yeah,
That's a
super
real
cool.
good thing.
Yeah.
And it's and not to mention the fact, logistically, you plan your meals out a few days ahead of time, and you're not having to scramble.
So you're seeing the results of your hard work, and there's a intentionality and a plan. And I think that's probably a good word to sum up this whole conversation: intentionality.
Absolutely.
I mean that can mean something as simple and safe as planning your food, or something as bold as creating a life experience that's going to be transformative.
That's right.
But intentionality. Super cool. So if people want to learn more about you, follow you as you continue to kind of tell this story and spread the good news, where can they go?
Sure. So we've actually kept our blog site live. It's Connecting4. So you write out, the number 4. So it's connecting4.com, all one word.
F-O-U-R.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. And then I'm on LinkedIn and also on Facebook. So Ash Merchant on both of those. And would love to connect with your listeners and look forward to us staying in touch too.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Ash, this was absolutely an awesome conversation.
Great.
I have a feeling you've planted some seeds into my wife's brain.
Don't blame me.
I may have an RV in my future. Folks, the show will be going worldwide. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Continue the fight against workplace dysfunction and dysfunction in general every week. And if you're not listening on iTunes, why aren't you? You should download it and listen. And if you are listening, please rate, review, and give us some feedback. But most importantly, let folks know on iTunes that you like the show, because that's how more folks will find it. More folks will be part of this tribe, and we will continue to grow our efforts to make the world one step healthier. So until next show and next week, have a great week and an awesome life.